Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I am David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David. How are you doing today?
Good, Bruce. You can shave off the playoff beard now, Bruce.
Oh, yeah?
The Oilers are out.
Yeah. I
Oh, you
actually
got
shaved it
Mr.
off about a month before the playoffs, and it grew back, and it's still growing.
Hey, it worked. It
Well, for a
worked.
little while.
Looks like yeah, I see Cat Stevens is there.
Yes.
It's interesting, Bruce. The Stanley Cup Finals are 2 games into it at this point as we do this podcast today, and the Avs are kicking the crap out of the Lightning. It puts a slightly different spin so far, at least, on the Oilers' loss to the Avs. If the Avs are this dominant, it's kind of encouraging. It's kind of not. It's encouraging in the sense that if the Oilers do get by the Avs, well, that's a pretty big accomplishment. But it's discouraging in the fact that this is going to be one heck of a hard team to get past in the next few years. And the Oilers are going to have to be significantly improved in order to do it. So it's kind of sobering, but it's also exciting to see Colorado do to Tampa what they did to the Oilers and then some.
Yeah, they're just smoking them. I mean, remember how bad Game 2 was when the Oilers lost 4-0 in Denver?
Yeah.
And it looked like, I mean, they couldn't penetrate at all. They got like 2 high danger shots or something, in the whole game. And I think somebody calculated actually 0 inner slot shots. Of course, everybody does it a little differently.
Yeah.
And we had very low totals ourselves. Well, geez, Tampa couldn't get a sniff on Saturday. And even with occasional bits of all-world goaltending from Andrei Vasilevsky, who saved what looked like sure goals on 2 or 3 occasions, they pumped 7 past him. And they made the defending Stanley Cup champs look like chumps. Like that was a real blowout in every sense of the word. And Colorado just dominated them for 60 minutes was my take.
Here's a mind-blowing stat for you, Bruce. Okay. In the regular season at even strength, terms of points per 60, the Avs had 3 out of the top 4 defensemen in the NHL.
Yeah.
Frack. Makar 2 points per 60.
Wow.
Taves 2 points per 60, and Byram 1.8 points per 60.
Wow.
The only person who crapped into the 3rd place spot was John Carlson. Oh God. Darn it.
2 points per 60 for a defenseman is off the charts.
Yeah.
And Taves and Makar, I think, are unquestionably the best pair in the league. Whoever you think might be the best defenseman, and many would say Makar at this point. But all those top-level defensemen, there's not many of them that have a partner the caliber of Devin Taves that was snapped up from New York Islanders in a very clever bit of business by Joe Sakic, who's had a few very clever bits of business, and you can see them on the ice winning games for his Avalanche. And Devin Taves is such a player. And he made one mistake in the Oilers series, but I think only one, on the Nuge breakaway goal in Game 4. And otherwise, man, he great defensively, great in transition, really good in the offensive zone. And just a perfect partner for. And as for Byram, one thing that happened to Colorado in this playoffs was they lost Samuel Girard in the St. Louis series, second pairing defenseman. And that was a tough break for them. But at the same time, I was looking at it and thinking, Girard is the one guy I thought maybe was defensively a little bit vulnerable on Colorado. And, of course, we never saw him first nor last in our series with this broken sternum. He really got drilled. But what that meant was they promoted Bowen Byram into a higher calling, and he's been fantastic. And it's like, what are you going to do? You got 3 defensemen that can all skate like the wind. They all play strong positionally. They're good with their sticks. And when they get the puck, it's it or they or both are gone the other way.
What a boneheaded move by the Islanders. I remember when that trade was made thinking, oh, geez, what a good deal for Colorado. Like to get this
Mm-hmm.
solid hockey player, and he's only gotten better. And he's got Bruce, to make matters worse, he's got 2 more years left now at
Yeah,
4.1 million.
yeah, that's a great contract.
Oh, did he have
And
that? I wonder, did he have that contract when he got traded?
they got him for a decent
Two seconds?
prospect who was a second round pick and another future second round pick. So basically 2 seconds. So a
Yeah.
bitter Oiler fan could say they got him for the same price Oilers paid for Andreas Athanasiou. And
They would not be incorrect.
you could at least start a discussion, if not a flat out argument on that basis alone, if you cared to. I just find it depressing. Man, would he solve a lot of problems for us, Devin Taves? Oh,
Oh,
man.
yeah.
As he has done in uh, in Colorado.
Just trying to see where
Yeah, I'm looking up his current contract too as we speak.
Taves 2 more years at 4.1 million. He
Signing team
signed it.
Colorado.
Okay, so they traded and it was a
Yeah,
trade and sign.
I think he was a uh, uh, was he RFA at that point? He must have been.
Yeah.
He would have been 26 at that time, and so and New York knew they couldn't afford him because they'd blown their wad on Leo Komarov and Cal Clutterbuck, Matt Martin, and Casey Cizikas and guys like that. So they were uptight to the cap. So
Boy,
they wound
Chung.
up moving him, and 4 times 4.1 Colorado signed him for, and man, but this is the thing. Joe Sakic at that time had two things. He had assets to deal in terms of extra draft choices and prospects, and he had cap space in which to take on somebody else's issue. And the Oilers generally are shy on one or both. They're always down draft picks, and they never have any cap space. So they're not in really good shape to make trades like that.
Well, last summer they picked up Duncan Keith, Bruce, for not a
Hmm.
dissimilar price.
Yeah, really.
Let's not
Yeah.
get into that. Oh, we actually are going to get into it today.
Oh, yeah.
So
Okay.
today is we're starting our keep, hold, or fold series where we go through various Edmonton Oilers players and we judge, should the Oilers keep them? Should they hold, means should they maybe think about moving him, see what comes up this summer? Or should they fold, which would mean trading him or buying him out? Keep, hold, or fold. And we're going to look at three players today: Mike Smith, Tyson, Barrie, and Duncan Keith in today's keep, hold, or fold. Actually, Bruce, we will start with Duncan Keith. So there's, just as a preamble, there's some talk that he may retire. Mark Spector puts it at 85-15. I think Bob Stauffer puts it at 70-30 that he'll stay. Spec at 85-15 that he'll stay. There's a deadline of some sorts. I mean, it's really a request by Oilers GM Ken Holland to Smith and Keith to make it known by July 1st what their intentions are. Duncan Keith has a contract which has a $5.5 million cap hit, but he gets paid $1.5 million in salary this year. It's the final year of his deal. So, Bruce, Duncan Keith, keep, hold, or fold?
Yeah. Uh, I think their position is almost by definition hold. Um, they have to wait out and see what decision he makes. And now I'm assuming that the Spectre 85-15 that you cited was 85 that he returns and 15 that he retires, and not the other way around. And I think there's a very strong chance that he will come back. And to me, I mean, the commitment's been made, David. Like, how do you move on from this guy? Right? You're going to trade him somewhere else. He has to be traded here, and even then, it took a sweetener to get him here somehow. And I don't see where the Oilers would be able to move on from him. I guess you could. There are dumping grounds, Arizona for contracts that nobody else wants. But I just don't see it. I think Ken Holland he's still happy. He got the guy and he wants to keep him for the year. And it wouldn't shock me if he signed again with Edmonton after that, although presumably at a way lower price. Presumably, if he
Yeah, if his
wants to
cap hit was
carry on.
$1.5 million this year, I don't think too many people would be complaining. But
Hmm.
that's a very steep cap hit for a second pairing defenseman. Still, top four, played in the top four. He, by our reckoning, Bruce, looking at his contributions to grade A shots for and his mistakes on grade A shots against, he started out the year in a bit of a train wreck, especially on defense. He was just leaking grade A chances against at the start of the year, often making positional errors, getting beat to the outside, getting beat out of the corner. He got better as the year went along. He always showed some proficiency, quite a bit of proficiency actually, at moving the puck this season. He was sharp with the puck from word go, and I think that also got a little better. He was making good plays with the puck all along, and rarely, he was. That was a good moment any good moment in any game. Duncan Keith's got the puck on his stick. Something okay to good is going to happen, generally speaking. Defensively, though, that was not the case. It got better as the year went on, Bruce, but it didn't ever get good or great. It got better. It got okay. And okay against top four competition isn't bad. Um, Now, there's someone who would argue that he really didn't have top four competition as the year went on, that Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci had the line share of the toughest competition.
Yes.
So he got a break, and that might explain why he stopped making so many mistakes on defense, is he got a little bit of break in terms of facing the toughest competition. Because it's one thing to face the Nathan McKinnons of the NHL, and it's another thing to face the JT Compfers, who's a good player.
Yes.
But Nathan McKinnon, if you don't have to face him like Nurse and Ceci always did, it's going to be a lot easier to get through a game with a clean sheet, not making any mistakes on a grade A shot against. Very
Hmm.
difficult for Nurse and Ceci to do so, but easier for everybody else if they're not facing McKinnon and Ranton and Landeskog and players like that. So anyway, Bruce, in the playoffs, I thought he was actually good for two. He was pretty good for 2 rounds. I thought he was really good against Calgary. And then, like the whole team, he kind of fell apart against the Avs. There was some bad moments in every series, of course, but against the Avs, he was part of a weak defensive effort, weak offensive effort. And part of an obvious and glaring difference between the Avs and the Oilers, in that the Avs defense were spectacular in terms of moving the puck. They were like Duncan Keith 10 years ago. They had 2 or 3 players like him. Just great mobility, moving the puck. And it was a problem for the Oilers. So, the Oilers are in, I guess, semi-hold, but I'm like you. I
Hmm.
don't see, well, I don't, did you weighed in, I think. I don't see Keith retiring. I think he's going to come back. He's a competitive guy. He's going to come back. He's going to be okay. He got better as he got familiar with his new teammates and his new team. I think he's going to be okay next year, probably in a top 4 role. He's going to be okay. But okay, as we saw, to beat the Avs, no way. No way, okay.
Yeah.
Okay isn't going to be good enough. They're going to need Philip Broberry or Dmitry Samarukov or someone else to step up into the top 4 eventually and be a better player than Duncan Keith if they're going to beat the Avs. I don't know if that's going to happen next year with Philip Broberry. That's a tall order
Yep.
for him to achieve. He doesn't have that lightning quickness and high skill level of a Bowen Byram. He has a package of assets which are really appealing, and which could round into an excellent top 4 D man. But I think it's going to take some time. So really the keep hold or full question with Keith in the end is, where does he play in the lineup? Because I think he's
Yeah.
back next year. I think whatever we want,
Hmm.
they're keeping him. So um, the question is he top four by the end of the year, or is he bottom pairing by the end of the year? And hopefully he's bottom pairing, but it's because some other player, Philip Broberry or Brett Kulak, has stepped up and is doing significantly better than he did last season. That's what the Oilers need if they're going to beat the Avs.
Yeah, well, Keith, I mean, his performance. If you look at the underlying numbers that I know everybody loves, I sometimes cite plus minus because that's the quick and dirty version, but the better one is 5-on-5, goals for and against. And Keith this year was 52-4, 38 against, so about almost 58% goal share, pretty good. And much of that came in the second half when he was teamed up with Evan Bouchard, and they had their, toughness of competition dialed back because of the all-in Nurse CC arrangement that Woodcroft and Manson went for. But with Keith on the ice, the Oilers, outscored the other team by a fair margin. Not so in the playoffs, 13-4, 17 against, and that pairing was the one pairing that did get outscored for Edmonton. One little known fact that caught my eye the other day was Keith, when paired with Connor McDavid, just over 300 minutes they played together during the season, so just over 5 games worth of 5-on-5 ice time, and the goals were 24 for Edmonton, 6 for the other guys. 24 to 6, 80%. And they had great sort of underlying numbers too, like Corsi was 60%, shot share was 59%, not quite 80%, but clearly the puck was going north. And how much of that was, just sort of small sample size where good stuff happened versus how much of that was Duncan Keith getting the puck to Connor McDavid in good places, or for that matter, Evan Bouchard getting the puck to Connor McDavid in good places. The results were pretty outstanding in the regular season. In the playoffs, they were 7-4, 7 against, so there's not much to take away from that. But that's just something, looking at this, that if I were involved in lineup deployment decisions, I would give that a good hard look and try and maybe even do some in-depth film study to see really if that was something that was going on between the two of them or the three of them or what have you, that pairing and McDavid's line, or whether it was just a matter of the goalies made a few great saves and they got a couple of cheap ones on the other end, and then McDavid doing McDavid things, which is going to float all boats.
Well, my memory, Bruce, what I was hoping to see in the playoffs is Bouchard and Keith out there with McDavid's line, because I always felt that was the best combination. That those guys actually were looking for McDavid and able to hit him with passes. Both Keith and Bouchard are excellent passers of the puck.
Yes,
and I'm not surprised to hear that number. And I think you would have to do video, closer video review and think about it a little bit more. But from memory, that's what I saw was two players who can really make a pass and another guy who can obviously take a pass at high speed. And that combination really worked. Darnell Nurse has a tendency to hold the puck and skate with the puck. I don't like him with McDavid. I don't think he's the best bet with McDavid because of that tendency. And CC is a good passer of the puck, but he's not at the level of Bouchard and Keith. So that's what I was always hoping to see, in the playoffs. And we often did see it, but I think they should almost make a 5-man unit with McDavid, those 2 D-men, and 2 wingers who can play with them.
The trick being, if you're trying to shelter Bouchard and Keith against competition, putting them with McDavid is not exactly saying, okay, other team, you put out your poor players against this group. So they had to do some push and pull there, and I'm not I haven't dug deep enough to provide any real insights as to who they tended to be deployed against and that sort of thing. I just noticed that number just kind of jumped off the page. 80% goal share is not a number you see every day over, as significant a sample size as 5 hours of hockey.
So in terms of points per 60, we were talking about how the Colorado Avalanche had three of the top four D-men.
Mhm.
Duncan Keith was in a group of four Oilers defensemen who were just right around 1 point per 60, which is about half of Cale Makar's production. To put it in context, Cale Makar's production being on another freaking planet, Planet McDavid, Planet McDavid's Makar. So CC, Nurse, Duncan Keith, and Tyson Barrie were all at about 1 point a game, and that's actually really good. That's pretty good for a defenseman. Bouchard was at 1 point. What's he at? 1 point. 1.5, 1.6, 1.55.
That's really good.
That's really good. And Evan Bouchard. So that's why, that's why you want him out there with Connor McDavid, because I mean, when McDavid takes the puck around the net and comes out the other side, you can also pass back to Bouchard for a great shot, right? And Keith and Bouchard work so well together. And I think something to be said in Duncan Keith's favor is that pairing really did work well together, I thought. And the reason is Keith, when Bouchard was paired with Nurse for a while, it was the same problem. Darnell Nurse would hold the puck and shoot it himself. He likes to shoot the puck. He likes to carry the puck. It's the wrong play when you're out there with Evan Bouchard. You should, every chance you get, you should be looking to set up Evan Bouchard for the shot. And Keith, to his credit, every chance he got, he did that. I mean, he didn't do it all the time because you got to shoot too, or they're not going to cover you like as much as they should. So he was always looking for Bouchard on that shot, and it's the right play. He was always looking for Connor McDavid. So I'm not surprised to hear they had such good results. Bruce, we tracked also ourselves who made mistakes on goals against and who contributed to goals for. In that regard, Tyson Barrie actually was the best defenseman on the team. He contributed to 20 goals at even strength and made mistakes on 27 against. Now with defensemen, this is not unusual for them to make many more mistakes against than for, because this is like they just have limited offensive opportunity, but they have all kinds of chances to make major mistakes on goals against because they're in the ultimate position of defensive responsibility, save for the goaltender. So they're going to make a lot of mistakes on goals against. So you're going to find it's almost always weighted to way more or somewhat more goals against. So Barrie was 20 and 27. Kulak was 7-4-9 against, which was really close to Barrie.
Yeah.
Bouchard 32-4, 44 against,
Wow.
which on a rate basis is also very close to Tyson Barrie. Cody Ceci 23 and 36, which is the same rate as Bouchard. And then you have Keith at 16, helped them score 16 goals for at even strength and made mistakes on 31 against. And his rate is about half as good as Tyson Barrie's rate. And it's the same rate as Darnell Nurse, who was 24 goals for and 44 goals against.
Mm-hmm.
So Keith and Nurse, in terms of the regular defensemen, were slightly not as good at on the goals for as compared to goals against ratio. Tyson Barrie being kind of off the charts. Good. Why don't we move on to Tyson Barrie now? Keep, hold, or fold on Tyson Barrie, Bruce. Where are you at?
All of the above. I think the general consensus of opinion, if there ever is such a thing in oil country, is that he's a decent player on an okay contract that has 2 years to run. But it does take a chunk of the Oilers' salary cap at $4.5 million for each of those 2 years, and that because of the emergence of Evan Bouchard, who played so well at even strength this year, but didn't really get a lot of time on the power play because that was Tyson Barrie's domain, that he's likely ready to take the next step, and that in a sense Tyson Barrie's in the way. That maybe Tyson Barrie is the player to move out to either create cap space or to bring a player under sort of similar contract terms, plus or minus $1 million, but it's, bring a contract back of a player who solves a problem at another position. And so I see that as a reasonable course of action. The fact that I kind of like Tyson Barrie and I enjoy watching him play for the most part is immaterial to, what should the team do to maximize their assets. And I think he's one of the best trading chips they have, and especially if it gets to the case where they're trading for a goalie. That one way to go about solving that issue is to move him. If the right fit with the right opponent comes along, uh, or otherwise to trade him in one deal and and then sign or trade for your goalie in a different transaction. Because they don't have a lot of cap room, David, and they got a few players to sign and not much more than $1 million per on the budget to do that right now, and that's not going to bring you in a number one NHL goalie or even
Yeah.
in.
Bob Stauffer keeps hinting that there's going to be more cap space than people are anticipating. And I
Mm.
wonder if, and this is pure speculation on my part, I wonder if what he's thinking is Barrie's contract will be moved. Or, I mean, what are the other options? I mean, they're not moving Nurse. It's up to Keith whether he comes back or not. They're not moving him. So those are the two huge cap hits there.
Yeah.
They're not moving Cody Ceci. I guess they could, in theory, move Warren Fogle, which would be $2.7 million. They could move, in theory, Zach Kassian, $3.2 million, or buy him out.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be like, let's say they move Kassian and Fogle. Well, there's $5 million. That would be, $6 million in cap space that you're not anticipating.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's what he's talking about. But I'm wondering if it's not thinking about moving out Barrie's $4.5 million a year for 2 years. So if that's the consensus, Bruce, about the Oilers, about Tyson Barrie, I'm going to say I like him more than the consensus. At this point in his career, I think Tyson Barrie is a really good NHL hockey player. And he wasn't that way in his first year in Edmonton. It's funny because he led the league in points, I think, for defensemen last year. I think he was I think he was a better player this year, not much better, but a better player, certainly at even strength. He came into the year talking about improving his defensive play, and that's what I saw. The year previous, you could count on, you'd need two hands and maybe your toes as well to count the number of times he made really bad pinching decisions at even strength that ended up in 2-on-1s, breakaways, 3-on-2 rushes against the Oilers. It seemed to happen every third or fourth game with Barrie where he was making the wrong decision. This year,
pinch.
At bad pinch.
22 against bad pinch. How many times did we code that last season?
Really painful. And we brought it up a number of times on this podcast. This year, very few times that Tyson Barrie make that risky, bad decision. His reads of the game, finally, were pretty strong. And when he was put finally in a third pairing role, he excelled. He really did at even strength. He was there. He rated out in terms of creating grade A shots and defending against them. It's the best Oilers defenseman in the playoffs. Beating out next best was Kulak, his partner, and then Ceci. So he now they were, again, it's one thing to do that against third pairing competition. It's another thing against Cody Ceci, or for Cody Ceci to do that against the Nathan McKinnons and Johnny Gaudreau's of the world. Much more difficult job, which is why I rate Ceci by far more valuable than either Kulak or Barrie. But Tyson Barrie really, really played strong hockey. He moved the puck well. He created more grade A shots than any other D-man at even strength in the playoffs, other than Evan Bouchard, who's in his own class as a puck mover, both on the power play and at even strength. In the regular season, Tyson Barrie was behind in that category only Bouchard and Darnell Nurse. I've criticized Darnell Nurse a little bit here for holding the puck too much and not getting it to McDavid or Bouchard quickly enough. Well, Nurse holds the puck because he's really good with the puck too. He can make plays, and he did in the regular season. So it's not an overall criticism. It's just in terms of him meshing with other players that my complaint lies. But I do. Already we had some technical difficulties. We're back now, and we're just trying to figure out where we were. And anyway, I'll just end up with my Tyson Barrie thought is that I think Tyson Barrie I wouldn't want to see him moved, but I think he's got a lot more value to another team than he does to the Oilers. I think another team's going to be looking for an offensive defenseman. They're going to be looking for someone to run their power play. They're going to be looking for a right shot defenseman. They're going to be looking for someone who can be solid-ish defensively. I think Tyson Barrie can probably play in a top four and hold his own at this point if he's in the second pairing on defensively, given the improvements he made this past year. And there's just no doubt about it. He's a good puck mover. So other teams are really crying out for that kind of player and someone to run their power play, especially if they don't have that. That's a team that really could use Tyson Barrie. The Oilers, of course, have Evan Bouchard in the wings. He's an elite puck mover, best puck mover on the team, and he should be on the top power play. There's just no doubt about it at this point. So Tyson Barrie has more value in some other city. The Oilers should in today's NHL, you've got to pay attention to that. You've got to move a player if he's got more value and maybe significantly more value to another team than he does to your team. So do that and make the trade, get the cap space, and use the cap space wisely, either on a goalie or maybe on a Vander Kane. And we had talked about, maybe they can get it moving Fogle or Cassian. That would be even better, but that might be, far more difficult to do than moving Tyson Barrie. So I think a trade is probably coming there.
Teams like Seattle, for instance. Seattle's top scoring right shot defenseman last year was, wait for it, Adam Larson. So they have, they got 25 points.
Oh, yeah.
But their power play driver supposedly was Vince Dunn, who had all of 11 points on the power play all season. I mean, bringing on a established guy like Tyson Barrie would make sense for a team like that. And there are other teams, where there's a identified weakness on running the point on the power play, and Barrie, he's proven that skill on 3 different franchises now. He's good at it, and that has value. So the downside, of course, you trade Tyson Barrie now and give Evan Bouchard that job, and then next year Evan Bouchard gets 65 points and his contract is up.
Well, his contract is up. They could sign him this summer, Bruce.
Yeah,
they could sign him to an extension right now, right? July 7th or whatever the day is, free agency day. They could give him a contract ahead of time and try to anticipate that. Wouldn't be a bad move. Might be a smart move to sign him to a 6-year deal, 7-year deal, at whatever it is. They're not going to have Duncan Keith's cap hit on the books after this year, no matter what. So the money that's going to Keith, the $5.5 million, that's going to go to Evan Bouchard. I mean, that's the way you have to look at it, I think. And if you could, whatever Evan Bouchard how many years he'll sign for at $5.5 million, I think that's what the Oilers should do. Just move out, if that's, hopefully that'll be 7 years. Sign Bouchard to a long-term deal. I mean, that's risky, as we saw with Clefbaum. It seemed like a really great idea for a while, and then it stopped being such a great idea after he got hurt. Right. But I don't mind signing players in their early 20s to a long-term deal. It's worked out for the Oilers in the past. It's worked out for many teams, and I think that's the way they should go. So, yeah, I'm definitely in the fold camp with Tyson Barrie. As much as I like the player and admire the way he's improved the defensive game, yeah, I do think it's time to move on. And then if you can move on from Barrie and Cassian and Fogle, then you've got a lot of cap space to deal with, and you could solve maybe a couple problems on the team in that manner. All right, Bruce, Mike Smith, keep, hold, or fold?
Again, I'm going to say hold. I don't think you can fold. It's just, you could buy him out, I guess, and you could save, I think, something like $1.6 million next year and pay out $800,000 the following year, which is actually a little bit more than you could save by buying out Duncan Keith. So I guess that's an outside possibility. I think the hold is what they're doing right now. They're waiting for a decision from him. Is he going to retire? Is he going to get medical advice that says he's not going to be able to continue his NHL career next year, that whatever injury that he was trying to hide throughout 21, 22 is chronic and not apt to get better, and they can just stick him on long-term injured reserve all season, which at least is, an outcome. And the good news with Smith is that he has no barriers on his contract, no trade, no movement clauses, any of that sort of thing. So I can see a scenario where if the Oilers are looking to upgrade in net, that he might be traded in return for another goalie, with obviously more being involved in the deal than that. But I'm thinking of a situation where some team has a established number one goalie, and they have a number two guy who's kind of chomping at the bit trying to get in there, and he's either not getting the opportunity, or he's got a nice big contract, and the other team would rather move on from that, and maybe they need to fill a need at another position. So as for instance, I mean, New York Rangers. I'm not saying this is the team to target, because I'm not sure they got Adam Fox. I'm not sure they need Tyson Barrie, but they have a goaltending situation where Shesterkin has clearly grabbed the bull by the horns, and he's going to be their number one going forward. And their backup goalie, Georgiev, has just finished his bridge contract. He's an RFA with a qualifying offer of $2.7 million or something in that range. And what are they going to do with him? I mean, they can't really, if they resign him, a lot of that's dead cap. They don't need a goalie that's going to play 30 or 40 games. They need one that's going to play 15 or 20 games. And so if they can move out from that situation, they're still going to need a backup goalie. That's where I'm going with it. And bringing on a veteran is one way to resolve that problem for a team that's looking to shuffle a little bit of cap space around. So
Georgiev's an interesting player. He's been in there with the Rangers 5 seasons, never playing that many games, and his save percentage has gone 918,
down.
914, 910, 905, 898. I mean, is Stuart Skinner much worse of a goalie than Georgiev? I guess if you trade for Georgiev, then you've got 2 guys who are okay bets instead of just one guy and Skinner who's an okay bet. Now you've got 2 guys. You have to wonder if the Oilers wouldn't be better off just holding on to Smith and going with Smith Skinner as opposed to Georgiev and Skinner. I mean, it's not obvious to me that that's the answer. Right. Now, there's other, because people talk about Billy Husso, whatever his name is. Sorry for mispronouncing it, Billy. He's, if you look at his career, he's had, I'm just going to find his numbers. He had a really good year this year, but before then, his numbers in the AHL were kind of indistinguishable or not as good as Stuart Skinner's numbers. And his first year in St. Louis, he played 17 games. He had an 893 save percentage. This year, he's at 919. So, if you're going to splash a lot of money at him, it's not obvious to me either that he is going to be the answer in St. Louis. They didn't think so in the playoffs. He had an 890 save percentage and was beaten out by what's the other goalie? Binnington.
Jordan Binnington.
Yeah, I was going to say Craig Billington, but Jordan Binnington. Craig Billington, who was a really kind of mediocre goalie in the 1980s, I think, with the Devils. Anyway, there's there's Marc-Andre Fleury, who in the end had a pretty mediocre save percentage this year. There's not incredibly, Darcy Kemper's a pretty good bet if they could get him, but I have a feeling Colorado's going to find a way to sign that guy. So anyway, we haven't really dug into the goalie options. Mike Smith, when he looks like a modicum of health, he was fantastic this year. He just came on and played some great hockey. Could he, like, if you were confident that Skinner could play about 50 games, 55 games, 50 games, then you'd think that's kind of an interesting tandem, Smith and Skinner, because you'd have the old veteran training Skinner. Skinner's shows he shows some promise as a puck moving goalie. You could certainly learn that, learn that from Smith. He could probably learn all kinds of things from Mike Smith in terms of preparing for games and fitness aspect of hockey, that kind of thing. You don't last till you're 40 in the NHL without knowing a lot about fitness, I have a feeling. So, but I don't know. There doesn't seem to be a lot of confidence that you should do that in Edmonton. That's the right play for Edmonton. It seems more like everyone's thinking, bring in that Georgiev kind of Husso kind of guy who's similar to Skinner in a lot of ways, and then you have two of these guys and you let them battle it out. And maybe that is the best play, Bruce. I don't have the answer myself. I think Skinner's on the team next year because he's got a low cap hit and he's a promising goalie. He's every bit as promising as these other two guys we're talking about, if you ask me. So, but what do you do with the other guy? Right. I guess I hope at this point, I'd like to, if Smith isn't ready to go, I just hope he retires. Like, he doesn't try to push it and have an injury riddled season again, because that's bad news for the Oilers. So if he really thinks he can do it, then come back and go for it. And Smith, Skinner, and then I guess you could try to bring in another guy. I don't know who that would be as a third goalie. But I guess I'm in hold camp. I don't have a super strong feeling about it either way.
Yeah, well, right now they got two goalies under contract for next year with NHL experience. I mean, they got guys like, Ryan Fanti, and Olivier Rodrigue, down there in minor leagues, but I don't think you can count on them at all. No. And so you're not going to want to go into the season with just two. They're going to clearly have to get a third guy. And, whether it's Richard Bachman, I mean, I think you want to set your sights higher than that. I mean, they've had good third guys in the past, Oilers, but I think maybe the best third guy they had was the guy that they let get away on him, Anton Forsberg, who was signed to be the number 3 man before last season. And they had to put him on waivers to try and get him to the taxi squad, and they lost him on waivers, and he bounced around from pillar to post. And hey, look at now he's on Ottawa, and he just signed a 3-year contract at $2.75 million after a .917 save percentage season with the Senators as their most used goalie. And so there was a really good signing, and we never got a chance to watch the guy because they were trying to shelter, I think it was William Lagesson at the time, from waivers, so they took a chance with waiving the third goalie, and it burned him bad. Hurt him at the time and subsequently. Anyway, there are goalies on the market, but the trick is, first of all, finding the right one, and then figuring out a way to balance them. The thing about Mike Smith that is so difficult to deal with is the ongoing health status. Last year he missed the first month of the season. This year he played 2 games and then he got hurt in the third game. He missed 2.5 months. He came back, he played a couple games, he sat out some more, he came back, played 1 game, missed another month, came back, took him another month to sort of get his game going, and then all of a sudden he was great. It was like he flipped a switch and he turned into, Dominic Hasek for April. I mean, his stats in April were off the charts, fantastic. And first round of the playoffs, very, very good. And then eventually, clock struck midnight and it was pumpkin time, So, I just can't see them. They got those 2 goalies under contract for a combined cap hit of $2.95 million, which would be an ideal situation if you thought you could get 82 NHL games out of the 2 of them. I don't see it. I don't see Mike Smith playing 41, and to count on Stuart Skinner, who has yet to prove himself as a backup level goalie in the NHL. Like, he was number 3 in Edmonton, and he got his chance because Smith was on IR. But to even entertain the notion that he might jump directly to number 1, I just don't think that's realistic. And Ken Holland said as much in the year-end media veil that he said it's just, think that Stuart Skinner could play 55 to 60 games is just not a, or even 50, would be, I mean, a perfect world scenario, sure, he's Jake Ottinger the second, right? He steps in and he just seizes the crease and never lets go of it. But uh, I don't think we have near enough proof that that's likely to happen.
Yeah, no more pumpkin time. It sounds like Ken Holland seemed a little wary of pumpkin time as well, Bruce.
Yeah, I got that
It's a
impression.
hard place to be.
Mm-hmm.
That was tough, right? Like waiting,
Mm-hmm.
and finally it did turn out pretty well, like a miracle. That was great, but I mean, you can't go through that again this year. And if
Mm-hmm.
Skinner does struggle, which is probably inevitable, and then Smith's hurt again, it's just a nightmare.
Yeah.
So they probably are going to go with that bet of two goalies, Skinner and another guy, and either Smith retires or they tried to trade him, I guess. Would they try to trade him? I mean, they could. And then, if and as you say, if it's the Rangers and their Smith isn't that pricey,
Mm-hmm.
then they can bring, well, is he what does he get next year? Let me
2.5 in cash, 2.2 cap hit. So
2.2.
he's
That
not free. He's not
No,
free.
that's a fairly big cap hit for a back goalie. That's
Mm-hmm.
getting up there. It's not outrageous though.
No.
Especially because he can carry your team. If the other goalie gets hurt for a while, he could step in and be a very good goalie for a team. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I wonder if Holland would make that clear to him too. Like in terms of Smith's decision right now, is like
Yeah.
we will be trying to move you this
Mm-hmm.
summer. We just feel like we've got to
Mm-hmm.
find a number one goalie, and we don't think you can be that guy. So we will be looking to move you, and maybe Smith factors that into his decision, whatever it is. Um, Doesn't look like he would retire. Looks like he would go on LTIR to get the money.
Yeah.
Can't blame someone for doing that. A lot of money to get.
Standard fare anymore.
Yeah.
Guys retire years after their last game if there's, contractual, if they're collecting insurance for being injured. Well, being retired is not the same as being injured,
Yeah.
right? And solving the team's cap headaches and LTI headaches uh, is of secondary concern to the player. And
And should
you blame Oscar Klefbom for collecting his uh, his salary? I mean, I sure don't. It creates
I've
all
heard some
kinds of
people.
headaches for Ken Holland, but why would you retire if you were him? I wouldn't.
Yeah. I've heard some blame Clefbaum for not playing hurt, like some skepticism, like he should be out playing here. I
Mm-hmm.
have heard that, but no, I don't think anyone's
Mm-hmm.
blaming him for taking the money because
Yeah.
most people realize that's probably what they would do in the same situation. Well, Bruce, that's I guess that wraps it up for those guys. Any other thoughts on those three players in terms of keep, hold, or fold?
Tyson Barrie for Chris Dreger. How's that? So Barrie goes to Seattle. Dreger, who was a very promising number two in Florida, went to Seattle and kind of laid an egg. Maybe he's looking for a different opportunity. And, none of these guys are gold plated, sure to make it. I mean, last summer, the Dreger was one of the prize gets. Linus Ullmark was another prize get. And I'm not sure those guys made a huge impact on the places they went. I mean, you're always hoping for the next uh, Kiprasov, right? Where he came out of San Jose. I think he was the number three man in San Jose at that time, and Calgary got him for his song, and he wound up being their go-to guy for a decade plus. And I mean, ideally, that's the kind of trade you try and identify the guy who's locked under a number one, who's dominant on his team, and find a way to get him. But you got to get the right guy, and you got to find a deal. And in the perfect world, that's what they do.
It's interesting because people are all, I hear there's going to be 10 teams on Ville Husso.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, his career overall, I think, is less interesting, not as strong career numbers as Chris Dreger. Dreger had this
Mm-hmm.
one bad year, 899 save percentage. But before then, between the minors and the NHL
Mm-hmm.
and the ECHL, he had strung together 3 or 4 or 5 pretty good years in a row,
Mm-hmm.
including a 927 save percentage in 23 games in Florida in 2021. So
938 the year before in 12
938,
games.
yeah. So
seemed
Yeah,
like he was ready.
I don't mind that idea, Bruce, of
Hmm.
trading, making that kind of trade. I mean, Dreger and Skinner, it's kind of two guys between them. Can you get
Hmm.
good goaltending? It's kind of like the same bet they made last year with Smith and Koskinen. Out of those two guys, are you going to get good goaltending? And they didn't for a large part of the year, but for large segments of the year, including in crunch time in the playoffs and the final stretch run of the season, they did. So between Skinner and Dreger, it's a pretty good price. What does Dreger make? You know what Dreger makes offhand?
3.5
Okay, so
for
it's not a
2 months.
bad price for two goalies,
Hmm.
and you're going to get one of them who hopefully you're going to get a solid number one play for a
Hmm.
big part of the year. I that intrigues me, and I would say
Hmm.
yes to such a deal.
It's at least you could talk to Seattle on that
Yeah.
term. I mean, it's not just so off the wall that they wouldn't even consider it. Because obviously they're in the process of building their team. They're not looking to win the Stanley Cup next year, but they are looking to put an entertaining product on the ice. Uh,
Well, they might
yeah.
be willing to trade Grubauer.
Well, there's the other guy,
He was
Barrie and Smith for Grubauer.
And Grubauer had
Hmm.
one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, including 9 seasons in a row of really strong hockey between the NHL and the AHL before falling on his face last year in Seattle.
Hmm.
So now he makes considerably more. What he must make?
5.9.
Yeah, so he's more expensive.
Yeah.
But if you're looking to make a bet on a starting goalie, now that's a
Hmm.
long-term contract.
Hmm.
Um, it's more money,
Yeah.
but that would be an interesting trade. Barrie for Grubauer, and
Barrie and Smith for Grubauer.
there you go.
There's my deal.
Yeah, have them take on Smith, either his
Hmm.
contract or his LTIR,
Hmm.
and you're taking on the risk of Grubauer. Now you have to. What do you think of Seattle? Like, were they that horrible last year? I
Well,
think they
both of their
probably were.
goalies fell flat on their face, right?
Yeah,
Grubauer and Dreger both came with a pretty good reputation, and they both fell flat, and the whole team fell flat, Dave. And uh, I personally don't think it was just because they had rotten goaltending, but whatever they had, it sure didn't mesh. And uh, Ron Francis. Results from the first expansion draft and the first free agent season was a lot less than people expected. I mean, they came eighth in the Pacific under the same set of entry level rules into the league that Vegas turned into a Stanley Cup Finals appearance. Now, obviously, unrealistic to expect that from Seattle, but I honestly did not expect a last place team.
yeah. I don't
That's
feel
what used to
sorry.
happen when you got expansion teams like Washington Capitals or Kansas City Scouts or Ottawa Senators, But in the modern days, when these guys pay their 500 million US or whatever, 650 million for Seattle, uh, they get a pretty good palette of players offered to them, and I just don't think Seattle made the most of it.
I was really sore when they got Adam Larson, but now I realize like no, Larson wanted out of here.
Yes.
That's obvious. So I'm less sore at Seattle. I mean, he was just going to go somewhere else. So that's fine. People have the right in the NHL. They have
Yep.
that right to pick their city. So I'm kind of over that fit of peak that I
Well,
had.
it opened up cap space, and they used it to sign Cody Ceci.
That's the other reason I'm good with it because
It's the salaries, it's the unproductive salaries that have years to run that are the killers. If you lose
yeah,
a guy, then you have a chance at least to replace him. And I mean, if he's a real bargain contract, you're probably not going to replace him at quite such a bargain. But at least you don't have, sort of two problems. You're not paying the mortgage on the old house and also have one on the new house. And it's not one of those dire financial situations that when the guy is gone and his salary, and there's no retained salary or any of these other uh, entanglements, and then at least you can sort of plan ahead with a bit of a clean slate.
just one bit of news that we'll catch up on. It looks
Hmm.
like Vancouver. It looks like they have signed Kuzmenko, the Russian forward, who's got a high level of skill and was a good scorer in the KHL level. It looks like Vancouver signed him, but and the Oilers missed out on him. I think, Bruce, that he would, as you explained in the last podcast, he would have been a cheap signing for the Oilers. It would have been nice to sign the player. I think the player probably made the right decision for himself, that he'll have much more opportunity in Vancouver to get playing time. There's a lot of good wingers on the Edmonton Oilers right now. And, someone was saying, one of the TSN people was saying, he's a top 6 winger when he comes in the NHL. Well, good luck with that in Edmonton. Yeah. There's a lot of competition. I would have been glad again if he had come here, but I'm not surprised that he chose another team.
Yeah, well, he was looking for guarantees on things like power play time. And I'm not sure Edmonton, they're 1-3-1. Well, the 3 on the 1-3-1 are all under 8-year contracts. Like, those guys aren't going anywhere. And I don't suppose that Kuzmenko is a net front guy or a point man. Like, you can't really make those guarantees. And maybe in Vancouver they could. Or maybe in Vancouver they're saying, okay, now we've got Kuzmenko, now we can move out Brock Besser because we replaced him for cheap. And we can move on from Brock Besser and use that salary and maybe assets in a trade to address other needs. So they can say, you can have Brock Besser's spot on the power play because he ain't going to be here anymore. And I mean, that's a real, I wouldn't say that exactly, but that's one realistic outcome from the Vancouver signing of Kuzmenko. And if Oilers had signed him, I think it would have spelled curtains for one of Yamamoto or Puljujarvi, to be frank. And since he didn't sign here, there's still at least the possibility that both those guys will return. But that's a keep, hold, or fold for another day, David.
Yeah, we'll get on to that. Someone's saying that the Oilers should sign Braden Holtby here. Well, he had a not bad season, I guess, in Dallas. But he wasn't the starting goalie. He wasn't the starting goalie at the end. That was Ottinger. Maybe due to injury. I wasn't following it that closely. All right, Bruce, let's leave it there. Thanks for talking today.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.